The 1985 Chicago Bears were one of the best teams ever assembled. The team was led by head coach Mike Ditka and defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan. Although Ditka was the head coach, he had almost no control over the defense. The Bears' offense was led by Hall of Fame running back Walter Payton, who was my dad's personal favorite running back. But what really led the Bears was their defense. The combination of Buddy Ryan being one of the greatest defensive coaches of all time, and the amount of Hall of Famers and All-Pros that they had on this team, led to a deadly combination. The defense allowed under 200 points for the entire season, and they went 15-1 in winning a Super Bowl over the New England Patriots. One of the most notable things about Buddy Ryan and his time with the Bears was his 46 defense, also called the Bear Front. The 46 was their base defensive structure, and with the players that they had on their roster, it was extremely dominant. Here's the base structure in the 46 defense. We start with the defensive line. As I mentioned earlier, they use what is called the Bear Front. But a Bear Front, also known as a TNT front, depending on the personnel that you employ, means that you're going to have the center and both guards covered up. The center is covered up by a zero technique nose tackle. For those of you not familiar with the defensive numbering system, a zero technique nose is a nose tackle head up on the center. The guards are covered up by 3 techniques, which means that they are shaded to the guard's outside shoulder. Since you have all 3 interior linemen covered up, you are almost guaranteed a one-on-one. And since they had great pass rushers, this led to mismatches and allowed them to get a lot of sacks and pressures. Now we will talk about the linebackers and the strong safety. You probably are wondering, why did I mention the strong safety? Well, a key aspect of the 46 defense, getting the strong safety into the box, will almost play as a hybrid linebacker safety role. We will start with what they call the will linebacker. The will linebacker, or the weak side linebacker, is the guy that lines up opposite the strength of the formation. He'll play in a 5 technique, trying to line up roughly 2 or 3 yards outside the shoulder of the offensive tackle. The MAC linebacker, or the weak side middle linebacker, will line up in a 40 technique. What this means is he will line up head up on the offensive tackle, but will play a couple of yards off the ball. The buck linebacker is also in a 40 technique, but he's on the strong side, so he too will also line up head up on the tackle and a couple of yards off the ball. The Sam linebacker will line up on a 9 technique. He's trying to line up tight to the tight end's outside. This is also paired up with the strong safety, who is playing in a 7 technique. He's going to try to line up on an inside shade on the tight end. This way the tight end is covered up, taking away one of the biggest threats on the field and making it a very long day for the tight end. This defense takes away almost every gap on the line and allows him to bring pressure from almost every angle. They're also overloading half the line with defensive linemen and the other half with linebackers, making the defense pick their poison, especially with the quality of players that they had on this team. The 46 defense has a lot of adjustments, but a base rundown of it is that the defensive line never changes where they line up, but the linebackers and the safety will adjust based on the formation given, so that way they can always match the personnel. The cornerbacks will always be a pass-first defender. Because they have numbers in the running game, they can keep the cornerbacks out of the passing game unless they get a crack. Then they will have to do a crack replace. So this is common for most defenses, and not just to the 46 defense. Now that we talked about the base front out of the 46, let's quickly talk about how they call a play in. The way they call in the play is pretty simple. They start with the front, then they say the linebackers rushing on a dog or a blitz, and then they say the coverage. After they break the huddle, one of their players will announce the strength, and then they will adjust to the formation from there. The play calls and the assignment stay the same, but they will adjust to the formation on the fly. It's important to remember that they have more fronts than just the 46 and the bear. An example of a play is bear 1 dog. This means that the defense will line up in the bear front that we talked about earlier, and they might adjust to whatever formation the offense comes out in. Dog means that there is a 5-man rush. Their base 5-man rush out of a dog is by bringing the Sam and the Will along with all 3 interior defensive players. They can also pair this up with a stunt, which they would also add into the play. The stunt usually involves the 3 interior linemen. This is a great way to attack linemen, especially if you want to create a mismatch, especially since you know that you are going to most likely get some form of one-on-one blocking. And if the defense does go into something like a full slide, you know that you will have a pass rusher going up against a running back in pass protection, which is always a mismatch. Now you're probably wondering, does this team have anyone good to win these one-on-one battles? And yes, they did, as they had 3 defensive Hall of Famers, 5 defensive Pro Bowlers, and 6 defensive All-Pro players on their team. They also had William the Fridge Perry, who although was not an All-Pro or a Hall of Famer, is one of the most famous players on this team. He even scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl, although I still believe Walter Payton should have gotten the touchdown, as he did not score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. The coverage behind the dog is what is called cover 1. Since they have 5 rushers, they are not going to have anybody to play the rat or the hole. So this is also called free man, as you have 1 free player, the free safety, and 5 players in man coverage. The defense is going to try to funnel everyone up to that free safety, so they're going to play with outside leverage and try to force the ball up the field into that safety. The outside leverage should be able to take away most of the outside route, and since they have help deep inside, they can break any route that breaks inside and play shallow underneath it to try to get a pick because they have help over the top. Now that we talked about the base alignment from the 46 and one of their most common plays that they use, and a short history about this team, let's get into the review section. There are the 5 categories that we will always use: simplicity, complexity, uniqueness, visuals, and performance. The first category is simplicity. This is talking about how simple it is for the defensive players to learn their playbook and learn their assignments. This playbook does a very good job of it. The play calls clearly tell everyone where to line up, what play they are running, and any stumps, dogs, blitzes, or any other other type of pressures that might be coming. In the coverage, it clearly defines what your assignment is in a chart. This chart tells everyone what to do in the passing game and in the running game. In the running game, it tells you what to do if the run is to you and the run is away from you. As this is important, as you have to be gap sound in this defense, especially because you are trying to box the ball, meaning you're not trying to get the ball spilling out to any overhang players. On passes, it clearly tells you your assignment. Like in zone coverage, it clearly tells you what your assignment is, like a hook curl in cover 3. On the page after the chart, it shows what the play will look like with every adjustment based on the formation. This keeps them prepared so they're very rarely surprised by a formation, and allows them to quickly play on the fly and make adjustments fast. It also allows them to keep their base play calls without having to change it because the offense aligned in a new formation. They also do a good job of showing the defense what they're supposed to do if the defense motions the guy in, especially for cornerbacks on wide receivers. Defensive playbook was still pretty basic to understand after going through it. If you know basic football terminology and what the things mean, you can very easily figure out what is going on. And if you don't know what the terminology being used means, it is common enough to find out what it means on the internet or through a coach, as this terminology is universal for most teams. They also do a good job of telling you what everything means in the general information section of the playbook. A lot of the good playbooks have a good general information section at the beginning of the playbook. This talks about everything from terminology that they use to expectations a team might have. Whenever you are going through a playbook, I always recommend starting at the general information section to really get a good idea about a team. And if you ever do get confused or lost during a playbook, it's always good to resort to the general information, as if you have a term that you don't know, you can generally find out what it means in the general information section of a playbook. Since the playbook does a good job telling when their assignment and alignments that come with every formation, along with quickly being able to call in a play, I'm giving this playbook a good 3 out of 3. The next area for our defense is complexity. Now, we can't grade this playbook on modern complexity, as that wouldn't be fair to a playbook that's 35 years old. We have to go back in time and set ourselves in the mind of a coach facing this in the 1985 season. We have to do this because in today's game, the 46 defense isn't, as multiple teams have run this in the college and in the NFL game, including guys like Tom Coughlin, Rob and Rex Ryan, and the Bear defense is an almost universal goal line run. However, at the time, this was the first time the 46 defense was being run, so teams did not understand what was going on fully, and they didn't understand how it was operating, and this made it extremely hard to game plan for a team. They had the ability to bring anyone from almost everywhere on the field, and the defense was designed to overload the protection and create good matchups for their players, in which we talked about earlier. They had a lot of good players. The defense was also really good at attacking two-back sets. At the time, this was the most common offensive formation. Teams based out of the two-back set, and this defense attacked that and works really well versus them. It is believed that the 46 defense played a major part of almost killing off the two-back offense and giving the rise to the modern one-back offense. Obviously, it didn't completely kill it off, but you see a lot less teams running two-back offenses and a lot more teams running one-back offenses, with a big thanks to the 46 defense. The 46 defense also was very good against the run, as a major part of it was having +1 on the ball. What this means is that everyone was responsible for a gap. Since they had one extra guy than they had blockers, they were very easily able to stay gapped out and stop the run. Back in the 1985 season, teams did not have the way to neutralize numbers in the running game like we do today, with things such as the modern RPO. Since the defense had the ability to create matchups and mismatches, bring pressure from all over the field, do it in a way that teams had not seen at the time and teams didn't know how to prepare for, I'm giving them a full 3 out of 3 when it comes to complexity, as the defense was extremely complex for the time. The next area of this playbook is uniqueness, and this one should be pretty easy to figure out what it's going to be scored, but I'll still talk about it anyways. Is this playbook unique for its era? That's a yes. Before the 1985 season, no team had run a defense similar to this, with the effectiveness that it had. Obviously, teams had a TNT front, but no team was doing it like the 46 by overloading one half of the line with defensive linemen and the other half with linebackers. The 46 defense also has a non-traditional naming for a defense. If you know most common defenses in the NFL, they go by the 4-3 to the 3-4. The 4-3 means you have 4 down linemen and 3 linebackers, while the 3-4 means you have 3 down linemen and 4 linebackers. Now, the 46 does not have 4 down linemen and 6 linebackers. The 46 defense got its name from one of the players who played a critical role in this defense. It is named after Doug Plank, who was the strong safety. He wore 46, and he was a critical role in this defense as he played a very important position of that hybrid linebacker safety that I mentioned earlier in the episode. The defensive front is also named after this team. You will hear a lot about the Bear front, and that Bear front is named after this. When people think of Buddy Ryan and they think of the 85 Bears, they think of the 46 defense. And when people also think about Buddy Ryan, they also think about his fiery personality. This is an obvious 2 out of 2 if you couldn't see this coming. The next area on this playbook is performance. Here's the thing about this defense. It is very good if you have the right players. This is one of the best defenses of all time, but that also had a big part because they had so many great defensive players. The general consensus around the 46 defense is if you don't have a lot of good players who fit the role, it most likely will not work for your team. If you don't have good pass rushers that can win one-on-one, a good rangy free safety, and cornerbacks who can play with almost no help, and a hybrid safety who can play almost a linebacker and a safety role, this defense defense most likely won't work out for you. There's a reason it's very rarely used today. And also because of the rise of the one-back offenses, and this defense does not do as well versus one-back offenses compared to most other defenses. One of the other weaknesses of the 46 is the short pass. And this is backed up by the one loss that they had that year, which was by the Miami Dolphins and Dan Marino, who torched them on the short passing game underneath. However, we are not grading the 46 defense as a whole. We are grading the performance of the 46 defense in the 1985 season. Because they won the Super Bowl, had one of the best records of all time, and are widely considered one of the greatest defenses that the NFL has ever seen, I'm going to give them a full 1 out of 1. When you win the Super Bowl, you are most likely going to get a 1 out of 1 unless your side of the ball had no part of you winning the Super Bowl for the entire season. The final category of this playbook is visuals. This one's a little bit tricky, but for a different reason. That's because this playbook is 35 years old. I looked through 5 different playbooks from the 1985 season and ranked them just to see where this playbook stands up, and it was right around average. It's not the neatest playbook out of the bunch, and in some areas it felt a little claustrophobic, especially when they tried having all the adjustments onto one page. It was also a little bit messy, as some of the things were clearly hand-drawn, while some of the other ones looked to be a little bit more printed in some of the other playbooks. Although not everything was hand-drawn, as some things were printed out. So it was almost like a middle ground. Of course, they did have the chart, and like most charts, they usually don't break up the flow too much, but I do wish that they put the base play above the chart and they had the chart underneath, instead of just having the chart on its page all by itself and then having all the plays against all the formations with the adjustments on the next page. That's just a personal preference of mine. Overall, I'm going to give them a 0.5 out of 1 for having average visuals at the time. When we add up this playbook, we get a 9.5 out of 10, which is one of the highest playbooks we will most likely ever see ranked on this show. If you were to equate this to 16 games, it would have won 15.2 of them. This is fairly similar to what they got in real life, with 15 wins. Does a pretty good job of reflecting the playbook. A quick recap of the playbook is, it is pretty simple to learn if you understand basic NFL terminology. There might be a couple of things that you might have to look, but if you go to the general information, you will most likely find what you were looking for. You can also easily find the adjustments based on the formation from the front, if you just go a couple of pages further after the chart. It was also very hard for offenses to figure out, partly because offenses had not seen anything like it, and Buddy Ryan had a bunch of great players on his team who were able to execute his defense. Buddy Ryan and the 46 defense are a staple of the NFL, and you cannot tell the story of the NFL without it. The visuals for this era seemed right around average, but it doesn't take away from how good of a playbook this was and how good of a coach Buddy Ryan was and the defenses that he had. Not just with the Bears, but in his time in the NFL. Thank you for watching the NFL Playbook review. I'm Jonathan Midday. Unfortunately, because of how break lines up, there will most likely not be an episode next week after this video comes out. But make sure to check out my Twitter at Johnny Midday for updates for when the next episode comes out. I have a couple ideas of what playbook I want to cover, but I want your feedback. So feel free to tell me what playbooks you want to see in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified every time one of my videos goes live. Again, feel free to tell me what playbooks you want me to see or teams you want me to cover down in the comment section below. And always feel free to share a playbook with me. I'm Jonathan Midday from the Playbook Review, and I hope you had a happy holidays. And goodbye.